Today we're going to be talking about the number one question I get. How do I make this deck work? Now this deck means a lot of different things, so we're going to focus on 3 different archetypes for this video because I see 3 different archetypes constantly kind of just either frustrate players to the point they just throw the deck away and give up on the idea, or to the point where they just throw as many tutors as possible to make them work. And these 3 archetypes are either Secret Commander, just straight up jank, and then additionally we have your Monolithic commanders. Monolithic commanders, if you don't know, are just commanders that do something so specific it takes a weird build around to actually make the deck work. Think of Kalia, right? You're running a lot of 8 drops in that deck. It's so many 8 drops to where the deck just wouldn't work unless you had Kalia as your commander, but then it becomes a problem whenever that commander gets removed because now your deck just straight up doesn't work because you have a bunch of 8 drops in your hand. So again, those are the 3 archetypes we're going to be talking about today, and I think building these 3 archetypes and building them well will just make you a better deck builder overall. So let's go ahead and click on that whatnot link, claim your free $15, get 10% off all of your Tolarian Library proxies whenever you use code DVT4D, and then we can get right into it. My friends over at Baron of Dice are having a 15% off site-wide sale until the end of October. So now's the time to go pick up those awesome playmats and deck boxes that match. These are high quality and overall just unique. I'm really just in love with the look and feel of these deck boxes. When it comes to these guys, yes, they sponsor me, but I am a customer first, so I had to let you guys know, go get everything while it's 15% off until the end of the month. Now, the first thing we need to talk about is jank. Jank can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different players, but for me, it's taking a card and kind of just building a deck around that specific card or maybe even a specific interaction. And to do this, a lot of people just shove as many tutors in the deck as possible, but then jank gets a bad name for being a combo deck because at that point, let's be honest, if you shove 5, 10 tutors in a deck and the goal is to tutor up this card and win the game, it is just a combo deck. It doesn't matter what your combo is or how unique it is or what the interaction is. At the end of the day, you are just pulling off a combo. So it then turns, instead of jank, it's just a combo deck with a ton of tutors, and then people end up taking that deck apart. So how are we going to make jank more consistent without including all of these tutors? There's 2 things you can do here. The first one I think is just include tutors that are more specific and are power limiting. Maybe only have a way to tutor up your creature, or maybe just straight up use entomb effects that cause you to then have to reanimate the creature afterwards or reanimate the artifact or whatever this jank deck is built around. That gives you another barrier to get past. That way your opponents don't see, okay, you just demonic tutored and then cast your thing and now you're going to do that every single game, right? That not only makes the deck stale for you, but it also is just not very interesting to play against as well because everybody knows you're just going to tutor for that card every single time and then win the game. So tutors, let's make them restrictive and let's make them few and far between. The next thing we need to do is up our card advantage, but specifically our early game card advantage. I think commander players are very, very guilty of including too many card engines in a deck without just one-off card advantage. What I mean by that is you're including your cards that consistently give you card advantage over the course of a game, like Tatiova Benthic Druid, right? Whenever land enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. So that's a card advantage engine and it's going to draw you several cards throughout the game. The only thing is it's 5 CMC, takes a little bit to get on the battlefield. So what do we need that we want in our opener? We don't want a 5 CMC card advantage engine that's going to take us a lot of turns to get to. We'd rather have something like a one-off effect like your Faithless Looting effects. Now this isn't card advantage because it's draw 2, discard 2, but it is just powerful card selection. Not only do you draw 2, discard 2, but additionally you can flash it back and draw another 2 and discard 2. This one card allows you to see 4 cards, and the more of your deck you can see, the more consistent it is. So I think we need to pair a lot of early game card advantage with our card advantage engines, and that is just going to make your deck more consistent. If you're having an issue with card advantage, but you're looking at your card advantage pieces and you're running enough, I challenge you to look at how early you can cast that card advantage, because the earlier you're able to cast the card advantage and the quicker you're able to get the cards off of your card advantage, again, the quicker you can see more of your deck, and that's just going to add to the consistency of your deck. Don't shove 10 different card advantage engines in your deck that all cost 5 CMC. That is just not going to be as consistent as throwing in some one-off card advantage effects that are just going to give you a burst of card advantage. I do want to touch on wheel effects right now because I do think wheel effects are one of the most consistent and effective effects that I'm talking about here, but I consistently get questions on, aren't you just giving your opponent the win? And the answer is yes and no, right? Because it's a wheel effect. A wheel effect causes you and everybody at the table to discard their entire hand and draw additional cards. And there's some people that think you shouldn't even run them unless you're running a dedicated wheel deck. I don't believe in that at all. Because at the end of the day, when you look at the most efficient card advantage in EDH, you're going to end up with a wheel effect. Now, obviously, that's a little hyperbolic, but not really, right? You're talking about 3 CMC and you get to draw an entire new hand. And for the people saying, aren't you giving your opponents the win? I would argue this. In the case where you're casting a wheel effect, you're desperately looking for something, right? You're not casting a wheel effect when you have things in your hand to cast. So is the alternative, I'm just not going to draw cards and I'm not going to be impactful in this game? Or you could actually wheel effect and not only give yourself answers, but in some scenarios, you even want your opponents to find answers as well. Let's be honest, Commander is one of those games where one player is going to get out of hand very quickly, very often. And I found the wheel effects can actually just ring in the game. Not only is it going to give that guy next to you that decided to keep a one-lander and just has done nothing all game an entire new hand, it's going to give you an entire new hand, and it's going to give the other guy an entire new hand. So now, maybe the guy that got land starved, maybe the guy that got land flooded, and you yourself have an opportunity to get back into the game by finding some removal, finding lands, and you can stop the player that gets ahead. And then if you're the guy ahead, you just don't cast the wheel and it's all good. I will say wheels have a high skill ceiling. They can easily end the game for you if you cast them at the wrong time. And knowing when that wrong time is does take a little bit of game knowledge and a little bit of how to read the board and proper threat assessment, which I do think just Commander players overall have just terrible threat assessment, but that's, different. And that's something that gets better over the course of many, many games. But wheel effects are very, very strong in a good player's deck. Okay, will card advantage out of the way, back on topic, how are we making Jank and Secret Commander more efficient? Mass mill effects. Mass mill effects are one of those things that just helps a deck out. If you're able to just put a small package in your deck that can turn your graveyard into your hand, that is one of the most powerful things you can do. So if you're noticing, okay, I'm running a decent amount of big creatures in this deck, I'm running a decent amount of cards that can recur those big creatures, if you shove in a small mill package, that's not only going to catapult you ahead of your opponents, it's also going to give you more power in the late game. Because when everybody else's graveyard is shut off, your graveyard is ready, full of resources to reutilize. So I wouldn't, lean super hard into it. But I will say going the mass mill route to just get a ton of value is very, very effective right now, especially with all the cards we're getting. You can mill equal to power, you can mill 10 cards per turn consistently. And remember, in a deck that turns its graveyard into its hand, being able to see 10 cards per turn ends up just being way more powerful than shoving your deck full of a ton of tutors, because a tutor is not super efficient because you're trading a card for another card. Mass mill effects that are just going to end up finding you your key pieces are a lot stronger whenever you build that shell that allows you to use your graveyard as your hand, because you're effectively drawing 10 cards per turn, and whenever your opponents are removing your key pieces, you can easily get them back, because again, your graveyard is your hand. So not only does this make your decks more resilient, it additionally helps out find those key pieces you need to make the jank work. And again, that brings us into the jank. And I will say, this is kind of very similar for your Secret Commander decks. For those of you that don't understand Secret Commander, it's exactly what it sounds like. I have a Scarab God Secret Commander deck, and I chose the commander to be Muldratha because I just wanted green. I looked at Scarab God and it had that broken ability to reanimate creatures for 5 mana, but 5 mana is pretty pricey. So I wanted a way to untap all of my lands and utilize Massive Ramp to put more into that ability, so I wanted to add green to the deck. And this is where choosing a commander is fairly important. You want to choose a commander that buffs up your added commander, right? Or your secret commander. So I decided Muldratha. Now we're able to use the mass mill effect to mill into all of our creatures while also getting us more options for our Scarab God. Muldratha is a card that also benefits off of having a ton of cards in the graveyard. And then once we shove in our Seedborn Muse effects that allows us to untap all of our lands, we can end the game untapping with like 20 zombies. It's just a very, very fun deck, and it wouldn't be possible without this specific strategy. So I would challenge everybody to build one jank deck slash secret commander deck in their commander career, because it just makes you a better deck builder, because you have to look at the deck differently. You have to find two commanders that have synergy, and then you have to find a strategy that both of those commanders are going to benefit from. And I think that's where people fall apart with the secret commander deck. The secret commander deck needs to win without you ever finding your secret commander. Now, obviously, the goal is to consistently get the secret commander on the battlefield, but I will say you do need to be able to win the game without it. And so choosing the commander that's boosting up your secret commander is super important. Now, let's move on to one of the most, contentious ones, monolithic commanders. These are historically decks that people have described as being unable to win without their commander. And I think that's the problem. It's a deck building issue. Your deck should never not be able to win without your commander. And I think, again, maybe if you build the deck in a monolithic style, yes, it's cooked, but that's not the commander's fault. You need to be able to include strategies that are able to utilize the deck with your commander off the battlefield. Let's take, again, Kalia, for instance, because that's an example people use a lot, and it's an example that's easy to use and easy to understand because people are like, how am I going to cast these 8-drops? And the answer is simple. We need to include less 8-drops in our deck, more impactful 8-drops in your deck, which is super easy, and then additionally, we need to include a recursion sub-theme. Something that instantly comes to mind for me is like a rummage effect, a card that allows you to draw cards and then discard cards. This is going to allow us to discard those big creatures in the early game, find our ramp pieces to get us into Kalia, and then additionally, it can help us find our reanimation pieces. So if you open into a hand that has an 8-drop in it with something like a Faithless Looting and a reanimate, you can easily cast the Faithless Looting, put the big creature in the bin, and then reanimate it. And that's something you can think about whenever you're building this deck. Okay, we're not going to just shove a ton of demons in this deck. Instead, we're going to shove in a ton of rummage effects. We're going to shove in a ton of reanimation effects. And then finally, we're going to shove in some protection for Kalia. That way we can ensure that she's at least harder to kill. So it's not just we need to protect. It's yes, let's put in some more protection for this commander since it is a central piece in the deck, but we still, again, need to include a strategy that is able to win without our commander. So I will say the monolithic commander problem, I think it is a little bit of a deck building issue, but I think it's also like one of these problems that gets overshadowed. I think it's cooked from the start if you make it to where you build yourself into this box where this deck isn't going to win without its commander. It's like, well, if you build a deck to where it's not going to win without your commander, that's exactly right. The deck is not going to win without the commander. So I think that's just what I want to stress. A monolithic commander issue is a deck building issue. It's not a commander issue. Now, some commanders are more aggressive than others when it comes to this strategy, but there's always a way you can fit in a strategy to win without its commander. And I think that's something you need to be thinking about, not, oh no, this is a monolithic commander, I'm just never going to build it. Because that's a comment I've seen. It's like, hey, how are we going to solve this monolithic commander problem? It's like, well, just include other win cons in the deck, and it's literally as simple as that. Maybe a little bit more nuanced, but you understand what I mean. There's always a way. You get 100 different cards. I mean, let's say 66 because of the lands or whatever, but you get that amount of play whenever it comes to building these decks. There's always going to be a way you can take 10 cards and fit in a little something that are going to allow you to win without your commander. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to end the video here. Let me know what you guys think about videos about this overall, just overall deck building philosophy, because this is the stuff I love. I don't do videos on it a lot. I don't know how many people are interested in these videos. So if you guys can let me know in the comments down below if yes, we want more of this, or this was a lot of stuff I already knew. It really helps me understand what you guys want to see from the channel. But with that being said, again, I'll end it here. I hope you guys have a great day.